Happy New Year's, everyone. Welcome back to the Sensitivity Doctor. I hope you had a great holiday season and are excited and ready and pumped for whatever the new year brings for you. I know a lot of us start thinking about things like goals and resolutions at this time of year, even though I'm not always a fan of the idea of resolutions. I love how my guest today, Stacey Simmons, a writer and psychotherapist out of LA, helped to unpack how to actually make resolutions matter to you. So she just wrote a really cool book, The Queen's Path, a revolutionary guide to women's empowerment and sovereignty, which is just such a beautiful book, steeped with so much research. Lots of her work and life work has been put into this. But my favorite part of this conversation with her today is her heart, her passion, and her intellect for this topic were mind-blowing. And I had such a great conversation with her. Not only is she an author and a writer and a therapist, but she also does research with UCLA's Integrative Psychiatry Lab and Trans Science Research Center out of Paris. So I'm going to have her come back and talk about psychedelic therapies at some point. But I hope you all enjoyed this conversation and can take a moment to really check in with yourself. Are my goals and resolutions mine, or are they really someone else's? Enjoy. Well, thank you, Stacey, for coming. What would you like me to call you? Do you
Call
go
me
by?
Stacey. You can call me Doctor, whatever works. Like, I don't care. Like,
Okay.
I'm pretty
Okay.
easy. I only make
Okay.
people, my rule is that the only people I make call me Doctor are people who who are mean to me. So, it's like
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's like,
Then I'm not going to call
yeah,
you
don't call me Doctor.
doctor.
Yeah.
Yes, because I'm going to be nice. I promise.
Okay.
So, Stacey, I'm thrilled to have you here. I know your new book, The Queen's Path, just came out. This is
Yeah.
such a beautiful book. I can tell you put a lot of heart into it. I got to do a little light reading on it because I
Mhm.
just received it from your publishers, and I'm so excited because you really stand for something that I am so fond of and passionate about, and that's empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of bringing empowerment into how we start a new year. And
Yes.
when you wanted to come talk about making a New Year's resolution your own and not someone else's, that just really hit a chord for me. So I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. I'm really
And
delighted to be here.
good, good. And I was curious if you could let our listeners know a little bit about you and really what made you want to write this book and kind of lean into empowerment in the first place.
So, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. And
Oh, of
it's
course.
interesting, the book was almost an accident. So I had had a career in entertainment before and worked in entertainment both in and around universities and in and around studios. And it just got to be really overwhelming and miserable, to be fair. And
Mm.
I decided to go back to grad school, become a therapist. My PhD is in social and media psychology. So I needed, if I were going to do clinical work, I had to go back and get a master's. So did that. And then this book came out of research in that program. And it was, my goal was, having worked in animation primarily. When I finished that master's degree, which took almost 3 years, I was like, I just want to do something fun. So I wanted to look at the Disney canon from like Snow White to the present. And my advisor was like, you can't do that. That's a dissertation. Like you only have 50 pages. And what came was looking at two movies, and it was Maleficent and Frozen at the time.
Oh.
And the program I did was at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara, where it's very Jungian. It's very
Mhm.
archetypally driven. So I could look at archetypes. And what emerged was discovering this archetypal pattern that had been in front of us for thousands of years in the Queen's Path as an analog to the hero's journey that's not derivative of it.
Mhm.
And what I discovered was that it's the path to sovereignty for women. It's the path to empowerment for women. To say, no,
Mm.
no, the actual archetypal journey for a woman is not to become the hero of her own story, but to
Mhm.
become the sovereign of her own life, basically become the queen of her own life, and to find
Mm.
empowerment in that place of saying, no, no, my life actually belongs to me. It doesn't belong to a goal or a person or a job or a family. It's mine. And walking into the new year as a sovereign, right? Like saying, no, no, what are my resolutions about? if my resolution is about my body, is it for me or is it for someone else?
Oh, good
Is my
point.
resolution about health because I want to be here and live in this perfect body, which is perfect as it is right now,
Mm-hmm.
but make it last longer, make it feel more, make my experience deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the kind of way that the book and this journey for me has kind of turned out.
Gosh, I love it. Well, first of all, could you explain archetypes though? I'm
Mhm.
saying this because it's a concept that's a little difficult to understand, and I want people listening to really know what you meant by that. I think that's important.
Absolutely. So an archetype is it's a collection of behaviors and qualities that are reproduced by culture over and over again. So
Mm-hmm.
an archetype would be like a hero or a savior or mother or father. A
Mm-hmm.
symbol is when you put a name to that, right? So the archetype is hero, Luke Skywalker is the symbol.
Okay, there you go.
Right. So an archetype is mother, the Madonna is the symbol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a distinction between the symbol and the archetype. The archetype is kind of the overarching structure that we kind of place something on.
So, what would you say the archetypes of Elsa, and is Maleficent the name of the character? I just want to make sure
So
I'm
yeah,
saying
Maleficent.
Maleficent. Okay.
Maleficent and Elsa. So Elsa, let me start with Elsa and Anna because what I discovered was that there's actually part of the being on the journey of sovereignty for every woman is we're put on this track to be a divided woman. We're either the perfect princess, right, which is the Anna character in Frozen, or we're the magical character, and in that we're isolated and unprotected, and that's the Elsa character. And
Okay.
every story you look at, you're going to see that there's always a divided woman, whether she's divided within herself or she's placed in the story as two characters, which in those two movies, Maleficent and Frozen, it was two characters. But yeah, everybody gets put on this track. We're either, the perfect cheerleader princess or we're the goth girl, or something in between when we're in high school. And then as we get older, we try to navigate like, what does this mean?
I resonate with that just because it's interesting because I think about in that period of life, like almost trying on different identities, trying to figure out which one really fit, like that authentic connection with yourself. And
Absolutely.
it's funny, sometimes I don't love the idea of saying that my more assertive, I consider myself to be a pretty assertive person,
Mhm.
that my more assertive traits fall in the masculine category.
Absolutely. That's actually it was part of my frustration with the idea of the heroine's journey. Like if you look at other writers like Maureen Murdoch, I mean, she's a psychoanalyst. She wrote the original heroine's journey that other writers have tried to kind of add on to or take on their own. But she
Mhm.
was basically saying that the heroine's journey was about a woman kind of looking at the ways that she's been pulled into masculinity and reclaiming her
Mhm.
femininity. And it's like that doesn't resonate. And when you go
Mhm.
back and read that work now, I mean, she wrote it in the 80s and early 90s. It really does feel kind of dated
Right.
with that language. And I don't think that's it at all. I think women we don't exist in relationship to masculinity.
Mhm.
That's not what and who we are. We are in relationship to ourselves. We are wholly our own beings.
Right.
And being feminine or being female in this culture right now is prescribed by culture.
Mhm.
And I think the point of my work is to say, yeah, in order to find yourself, you have to determine where all of those cultural prescriptions have tried to tell you who you are so that you can become yourself.
I love that.
And that's really hard. For me, it came in analysis. It came from my analyst telling me, I remember I was in his office and I'd been through like all the trials, like all the pieces of the
Mhm.
book that I mean, I've definitely been on my own queen's path. And I was just crying. I'd lost a lot. My life was really, really challenging at the time.
Mm.
And I was just crying in his office. And I was like, why won't life love me back? I don't understand. I've done
Oh.
everything right. I've done what I'm supposed to do. I've been a good girl, right? Like the good girl.
Mhm.
And he just kind of looked at me with this puzzled look on his face. And he said, I don't think that's how it works. He said, you just love your life. And when you are loving your life, the act of loving your life, you'll be rewarded by loving your life. And I was just like, and I was mad. Oh, I was so angry. It's like, what do you mean there's no reward for being a good girl? I have spent my entire life doing this right now. It really shocked me. It really sent me for a loop.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering if you take this idea of owning your life for your life to those
Hmm.
listening, it's the beginning of the year. They're
Hmm.
trying to figure out what does this next, chapter look like for me. And I
Hmm.
will say from a perspective, from a neurological perspective, there is value to beginnings. That's a big reason why we tend to make resolutions or why we
Hmm.
tend to set goals at the beginning of something. We get more dopamine release when
Hmm.
we do it
Hmm.
that way.
Yeah.
So there is a method to the madness why this is such a big thing, aside from it being completely commercialized. But I'm curious, how can we take something that, on one hand, we're really kind of setting ourselves up for success by using a beginning point to make
Hmm.
a resolution? I don't even love the word resolution, to be honest.
Yeah.
And we can unpack that. And how do you use that to your advantage, but still make sure it aligns with yourself, your goals, and as you're saying, your sovereignty?
I think the first step really is to look at what is the reason you're trying to get to a goal? Like what is the goal and what is the purpose for it? I'm not really big on the word why because I think for most people why creates anxiety. So I want to understand the what and the how and where do you think you're going? Because if
Mm,
you think you're going somewhere that's going to give you a reward,
mm-hmm,
right? What is the meaning in the reward? And until
mm-hmm,
you understand the meaning and the reward, it's going to be really hard to stay on the goal of whatever you're deciding for the new year, or deciding as a new chapter, or deciding as a new journey. If you don't know, if there's not an understanding of the expectation of the end, then
mm-hmm,
it's going to be really hard to commit to. And I think,
mm-hmm.
we get the dopamine high when we are like, yeah, I'm gonna start new and I'm gonna do the thing. And what winds up happening is you don't get enough dopamine in the doing to sustain
Good point.
the practice, right?
Mm-hmm,
So if you know that going in, right, that the dopamine hit is part of the excitement, and you can plan to not be motivated by excitement, you can plan for discipline to give you something else, then you have to know what the discipline is about, right? Like
mm-hmm.
what are you putting the discipline in for? And that has to be the sovereignty piece. That has to be the piece that says, well, I've been a mom, or I've been a teacher, or I've been a, person who works in a factory for a long time, and I don't want that life anymore, or I don't want that anymore, or there's something more that feels like it's calling me. What is the more? If your resolution is to write a book, or your resolution is to work on your I don't know, work on your tennis game or something, like, then are you trying to impress someone? Are you trying to feel
Mm.
better? Are you trying to raise your own sense of self? Like what is the difference that's happening here?
I
So,
am obsessed with what you're saying. And here's my reason. I will
mhm,
say, I had mentioned earlier that I'm not the biggest fan of the idea of resolutions. And I
mhm,
think my reasoning is different. So I'll throw this out there, and then maybe marrying it with what you're saying can really like help someone have a great start. The reason I don't love it is because it's similar to what you're saying. There's not enough dopamine in the doing.
mhm,
And with my clients, I actually start revving up for their goals, their January goals in December.
mhm,
So we're talking about what are these little baby steps that you can start doing now in December that make you more resilient and set up for whatever
mhm.
you want in January. I have a serious problem with us just kind of, I call it like the weekend of the year. Like we just abandon all of our boundaries for the last couple weeks of
Mhm,
December and expect to have the physical, mental, emotional strength and willpower to stick to something that doesn't feel exciting all the time.
mhm.
And so that's the part that I struggle with. Just when I look from a behavioral standpoint, we're kind of setting ourselves up to fail.
100%. Yeah.
Right. And so, but why I'm so obsessed with what you're saying is because I have literally never thought of it this way. I've
Mhm,
talked so much with folks about the behavioral aspect and like SMART goals and chunking things out. I've never really thought about just the why. Like,
mhm,
why, even writing a book, why
mhm,
is that someone's goal? Is it
Mm-hmm.
because you have a message? Is it because it's been a passion you've wanted your whole life? Or is it because you feel like it's a milestone marker that other people are expecting because of where you're at in your career?
That is it right there, right? Like, and then you're back to that is going to be really hard to keep motivated on. It's going to be
Mhm.
really impossible to keep motivated if the only thing motivating you is someone external to you who may not
Mhm.
even be real, by the way. Some external
Good
voice
point.
giving
Mhm.
giving you a dopamine hit, right? Like they're going to think
Mhm.
I'm good. They're going to think I'm
Mhm.
successful. They're going to think I'm doing a good job. It's like, okay, but that can't be all because if
Right.
that's all, that's going to last about a week,
Right.
and then you're going to be miserable, right?
I think that
So,
is actually, if you look at statistics, it is about 7 to 10 days
hmm
that people rush into the gyms
hmm yep,
and stick to the resolutions.
hmm
So let's say someone does, sit down and they take this time to really meditate on, is this my path? Is this my resolution? Not anyone else's, not pressure from society. And they do choose something that they feel passionate about.
hmm
How can they stay excited or sustained? I mean, have you had any, experience with your clients or yourself where you start to kind of dip out of that goal, but then you can get back into it?
Absolutely. It really does come back to the purpose, right?
Mhm.
There has to be a connection for you. I tell my clients all the time, and I work in Los Angeles, and my clientele is primarily like creative people. So they're actors, they're writers, they're directors, they're producers.
Mhm.
And so and as productive as they might be, they're also very volatile, right? Like, so they go up
Mm.
and down and lots of that, right?
Mhm.
And it's, people almost to a person, they're like, where do I find the motivation? I'm like, there's no motivation. Motivation is cheap. Motivation is dopamine, right?
Mhm.
What is sustaining is discipline. And you can
Mm.
actually, if you want to just purely talk on a neurobiological level, you can improve that with things like oxytocin. Have a buddy, do it with somebody, have a
Oh, I love
partner,
that.
right? So that you're not only, because that connection is not about the you need the other person to validate your work. You need the other person to accompany you because you need a hit of oxytocin while you're doing it to keep you motivated, right? And so finding the little cheats, right? Like a partner, that's what really an accountability buddy is. I don't love that language, but it's like, using what is going to work for you on a neurological level in a practical goal oriented setting. So, giving yourself the understanding of the purpose, what the reasoning is behind, and really, can get kind of ugly looking at your own stuff. Like, oh, wait, I wanted to write this book because my mom always told me I should write a book, or my mom was a writer, or my dad was a writer, and I need to live up to that. Like, if you unpack that and you find that that's actually not yours, it's someone else's, it needs to go away. And you need to find the thing that is yours. Maybe you want to be a painter. I have a client like this. I write about her in my book. Like, she spent years and years and years of her life becoming an engineer, and she worked in aerospace. She was like super qualified, very, very smart. She wanted to be an artist. She had secretly taken painting classes and drawing classes, never told her parents any of it, never showed her art to anyone. And it's like, what do you, and she was incredibly skilled. Like, her house was filled with beautiful art that she had created. And but she was scared of it because it wasn't what the people around her and the people who gave her validation in the world expected of her. So she had to find a new expectation. She had to find the courage to stand in this place that says, no, I'm that engineer. I can do it, but it's not me. It's not who I am.
Right. And this really sounds like it could extend far beyond New Year's, obviously, far beyond resolutions. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what is my goal and is it mine?
Mm-hmm.
Really sounds like what you're saying. Or to the point of this episode, what is my resolution and is it
Mm-hmm.
mine?
Absolutely. And how do you come to that? How do you give yourself permission to look at that with really honest eyes, right?
Hmm.
Like, because it's hard. It's hard to break down the version of ourselves that we portray
Mm-hmm.
for other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's challenging for people sometimes. A lot of times that external definition is the most important one.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for people.
Well, especially I consider that a lot of people who listen to this podcast are sensitive, and
Hmm.
highly sensitive people are so active in their mirror neurons, meaning the parts of the brain fire when someone else is doing something or feeling something. It almost feels like we're doing it or feeling it.
Hmm.
And I can imagine if you're in close relationship with other people who are doing or feeling certain sorts of resolutions. Like maybe you haven't been fixated on your weight or your physical health, but your friend group or people that you're around are all talking about this and are
Hmm.
all, I don't want to say obsessing, but kind of obsessing about it.
Right.
As a highly sensitive person, especially, and really anyone, but I can see it being incredibly important to take the moments of quiet to check in with yourself so that
Hmm.
you're not hearing other people's voices and those mirror neurons are saying this is your voice, this is your voice, when it's not.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that level of, high sensitivity processing that HSPs experience, right? I think they are much more likely to take in those external messages and not even realize. Depend. I think it also depends on how old that person is and what their life experience is. But I think they look for that. They look for the mirror neuron almost to go off almost as a validation of their experience. Like, oh, because it's true. You feel so deeply. You feel so passionately a lot of times. And if you lose that connection, it feels like you're doing something wrong. And I think it's really important for HSPs in particular to have more connection to their sovereignty, to say, wait, what is it really? Because they also tend to be the people that can change the direction of their friend group, or they can change the direction of their workplace or their community. They often have that kind of capacity. I don't want to say they always have influence because that's not always true, but they certainly have that kind of passion a lot of the time to be like, no, no. I mean, we know that HSPs are 20 to 30% of the population, and we would all die out without HSPs. So, we need them. We need them to be in that place of sovereignty. So,
It's interesting when you said that a highly sensitive person may be looking for someone else's affirmation so that that mirror neuron can give them internal affirmation about their
mm,
goal. It made me reflect on when I set goals, like how often
mm,
it almost feels like when my goals are brand new, when they're like little babies and I'm trying to figure them out. I mean, honestly, when I shifted from this podcast used to be myself and a co host.
mhm.
And when she left, I took it on as my new baby. And it was, I'm going to own this. It's going to be wholly, holistically my creativity and my vision, and I started to internally explode. It
Yeah.
was a lot to take in, and I think in the beginning when I think about it, I remember taking like the icon or the logo and sending it to a collection of friends. What do you think? What's your thoughts? Like getting almost too much input. And then
Hmm.
as I started to narrow in on my own voice and what I did and didn't like, I dropped I didn't need all of that affirmation, and all of that sort of dropped off to the point now I'm very strong in my voice of, oh no, this is exactly what I like.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way, it's almost like if that is your natural inclination, if you do naturally lean into consulting with others or getting feedback from friends and family, I wouldn't want to say completely obliterate that if that's natural to you. But I wonder if there's a way, in your opinion, to still lean into that natural tendency,
Mhm.
but maybe to be careful about who you're leaning into.
I think you're totally describing it. I think that especially for people who have high sensitivity,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm one of them, so I'm really partly
I
talking
had a
about
feeling.
myself, right? Like it's to be fair, like in the same vein,
Mhm.
it's like we need like I think we do need to put it out into the world. That mirroring experience is critical to us recognizing our own, not just it's not just being seen, it's also just seeing ourselves like, oh no, no, I'm real, right? Like I'm putting it out into the world and it's reflected back to me. Okay, I'm real. But then that once you do that, I think that step is probably the most important. I don't know that the affirmation from others is the part that matters. I think the part that matters is probably just putting it out there and going, hey, I'm doing the thing. I'm doing a thing. Everybody see the thing? Okay, everybody sees the thing. good. And then, oh, this is the part of the thing I like. What do you think about this? I think one of the hardest things for people who have high sensitivity is the goal of sharing something is not for approval in the traditional sense. It is for sharing. It's like, hey, do you like the thing I'm doing? Do you want to come be part of the thing I'm doing? Do you have a thing I could do? And it's not, do you like the thing I do? Like that's not, that submissive piece is not part of it for most HSPs. So I think there's an important distinction that sharing is not submission. You're not looking for approval.
That's a beautiful way to put that. I love that. Sharing is not submission. It's an invitation, really.
Yeah.
It's witness what I'm
Hmm.
doing, and it makes me think of, I have a client of mine who is highly sensitive and has ADHD and has autism, so
Oh, wow. Yeah.
she's beautifully neurospicy,
Hmm.
and we were talking about how she has been going to school knowing that she wants to be in the world of psychology and knowing this and knowing this. And then she had a conversation with her unsupportive father that derailed her whole vision. And she came into session, I don't know if this is my path. I don't know if this is what I want to do. So we did some, soul searching and a little bit of vocational counseling and arrived right back at where she started. And I had to remind her, even the people that should be the most supportive, like your parents, if you come from a certain, family structure or background, these people may not be the true
Hmm.
ones that are going to reflect what is truly yours. And I said, as
Hmm.
hard as this can be, you might not want to talk to your dad about school anymore. I mean, this just might be a topic you don't talk about. And so I think when thinking of your resolutions, because I'm imagining there's some people listening who have really grand resolutions too,
Yeah.
right? Really big goals that they're ready to dive into.
Hmm.
And I would hate for anyone to find someone who doesn't fully see them to reflect that back and witness that
Yeah.
back to them.
It's so interesting. I think to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, the piece about the needing confirmation or needing to be seen in it, I think recognizing that the other person, like your client with her dad, right? Like the other person is bringing their struggle and stress and anxiety
Mhm.
to the conversation as well. And if they are not comfortable in the resolution of who they are and what they're doing, and especially if it's someone who loves you, right? Like if
Mhm.
it's, your dad's a lawyer and he's like, psychology, like, what are you, how are you going to make a living? Like, that's their anxiety. That's not your
Mhm.
anxiety. And I
Mhm.
think for people who are HSPs, it's really, really hard sometimes to distinguish what is my feeling versus what is somebody else's feeling, because we so easily get pulled into the miasma of the collective when we're with someone. And and that part is really, really critical to just be like, okay, I'm going to check my body, I'm going to check my sensibilities, I'm going to check my awareness. What is this mine or is this not mine?
Mhm.
And that skill of figuring out what's mine versus what's not mine, what am I feeling in the ether here versus what am I feeling in my own body, my own sensibility, it
Mhm.
really becomes critical to helping HSPs, for me in my practice, understand what's theirs and what's not. I have this, I do equine therapy as one of my
Oh, so
modalities.
cool. Can you
And
explain what that is for anyone who doesn't know?
so equine therapy is where you work with a client and a horse or multiple horses to help the client see their own feeling, their own behavior. The horse is not a tool. The horse is a partner where
Mhm.
but horses have a very different kind of neurobiology, and they're very herd oriented and also very sensitive to predation. So they are very sensitive if somebody comes into their space that's incongruent with their emotions. So when you bring an incongruent person to a horse, the horse is like, oh, who's this? Right? Like, and it's very interesting to see how people respond to that from the horse. And so there are exercises that we do. But one of the things that I always do with the person on their first or second visit with the horse is to say, my horses live in an enclosure. It's California, so they can live outside most of the year. And there's, of course, it's a pasture. There's poop everywhere, right? So the when
We're
the
talking
client comes
about
up and
poop, folks.
talk, yeah, welcome to psychology. We're talking about, but I asked them, can you tell which pile of poop belongs to which horse?
Oh,
And
interesting.
people get really like they really want to answer the question, right? They want to get scientific about it. They're like asking, okay, well, is that one a girl? Is that one a boy?
Oh my
Like,
gosh, that would totally
yeah,
be me. I would spend way too much time trying to answer that question.
they are, and they're trying so hard. And I'm like, I mean, the secret is you can't answer the question, right? So I'm like, okay, can you tell whose poop it's not? And
Mhm.
and to a person, they say, mine. Like, bingo. The poop is not yours. It is not your
Mm.
responsibility. That doesn't mean it can't affect you. You could slip
Mhm.
and fall in it. You could track it into your car and take it home. You could get it on your clothes and then you'd be mad at me. You could smell funny all day. Like, there's all kinds of ways this can affect you. But
Right.
at the end of the day, it's not your shit.
Oh, I love
So
that.
knowing which is you, what's yours and what's somebody else's, critical to maintaining this idea of the goal. Like, the goal is it mine? And when I get a feeling about it, when I get a sensibility about it, when I'm planning my process of how I'm going to live it out, how I'm going to do it, is it mine or am I
Mhm.
borrowing from someone else? And if I'm borrowing, is it useful or is it meaningful? Or am I just doing it to get a hit of dopamine a year
Mhm.
from now that's going to last 10 minutes?
Right. Oh my gosh, I love that analogy. I'm so excited to have a poop analogy to share with my clients now. That is thrilling. When I think about also the fact that if something is yours, it will
Mhm.
be so much more natural, I think, to overcome what almost looks like the kind of like the habit hill,
Mhm.
where when we don't have something that's a habit, every time we make a decision, we use a little glucose. We That's
Mhm.
where the decision fatigue comes in. And
Yeah.
if you're constantly having to decide, I'm going to do this new habit, I'm going to do this new thing, it's exhausting. It's
Mhm.
not until I know there's different numbers. Some people say 21 days, some people say months, years.
Mhm.
But when you do something so often that you don't have to think about it anymore, it's so much less draining. And that's when really it's a habit.
Right.
I could imagine that if you're trying to start this goal, this resolution, this path, and it's someone else's, not only are you having to get over the habit hump, but you're also having to have a constant dialogue with this external voice. So you've got like these two roadblocks in your way.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it too, like there's a, I mean, I get all kind of psychoanalytical on you, but everybody has an introjected parent or an introjected critic, right? And so that introjected voice, are you aligning with it? Do you have an alliance with this critical voice? Do you have an alliance with a parent who may not have very much influence on your day-to-day life anymore? Like, where are the alliances that are keeping that going? And how exhausting is that for your poor brain, right? Especially as a high sensitive. Like, you that alliance is costing you a great deal to maintain. And it doesn't mean that you have to give it up, but you just have to be aware of it sometimes. Just knowing that it's there to say, wait, let me ask myself, is this mine or is this, my mom that I've been trying to please and it's impossible because she's never going to agree with this decision or this goal.
Mhm.
So,
I love that. So, when you think about everything that we've discussed today, can you share how this has maybe shown up in your own life, and giving an example of what it looks like to notice that it's not aligning, what that might feel like or sound like, and then what can someone do if they do recognize, uh-oh, this actually wasn't my goal, or this wasn't my resolution, this was someone else's poop.
somebody else's poop, indeed. For me, it's kind of, there are many examples that I have in my own life. And,
Mhm.
and one of them was, I mean, probably the most important one. I had this goal of being this high powered, high profile, having this high profile job. And I did everything in my power to do that. I worked in studios and then I went and got a PhD and I worked in a university, and I'm from New Orleans. I'm from Louisiana. So I went and worked at LSU, and it was this very high profile job, lots of attention, and I was absolutely miserable. And all of it
Mm.
had been for my mom to be like, I'm proud of you. And part of it was my mom was never going to be proud of me because I was the opposite of her. She wanted me to emulate her life. She had
Mm.
always wanted to be just a wife and a mom, and she didn't get to have that because my dad left when I was 12, and she was unhappy about it. And she was disappointed. And she felt, and every time I would try to double down on making her proud of me, it was with my gifts. I
Mm,
wouldn't do it her way. I'd say, no, but look, I'm doing this to show you how good I am. And she'd be like, yeah, but I don't care. Basically, I don't care about that. When are you going to have a baby? Right.
mm,
And it's like, I can't please you with my stuff, evidently. And so, and no matter how big I made my stuff to say, look, I'm making money, I'm getting prestige, I'm getting attention, I'm people are writing articles about me, and like it didn't she didn't
mhm,
care. Like that was never going to
mhm,
impress her. And it wasn't for me. It was me trying to please her, to get her attention.
mhm.
And when I left that job and went back to school to be a therapist, all of my friends were like, well, thank God, it's about time. Like, we've been waiting for you
The ones
to
who were
find.
supporting
Right.
your
They're like,
path.
exactly. They're
Mhm.
like, girl, you've been miserable for a long time. So thank goodness you're doing something that seems more like you, that seems more appropriate to you.
I love
Yeah.
that. It kind of sounds like if you're trying to figure out who is on your path, it's the people who cheerlead and support when you are leaning into things that do feel more just authentic to yourself in
Hmm.
general. And I have
Yeah.
to say, one thing that, we didn't touch on, but I do think it's worth mentioning briefly is that as I was listening to you, I was thinking about anyone listening who maybe subconsciously, unknowingly has been coercing someone else's New Year's resolution. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
coercing someone else's New Year's resolution or goal. Whether
Hmm.
it be like a spouse trying to encourage their partner to get on a health journey, or someone really trying to encourage a friend to do a goal that's theirs, but maybe not, your
Yeah.
friends. I do think it's good to reflect on, am I trying to pull someone else out of their path too?
Yeah. I think that's a really important insight. And I think the only way to know is to sit down with that person if you care about them and
Hmm.
ask the poop question, right? Like, is this yours or is it mine?
Right.
Because if and look, it might be that you're getting pressure from a partner or you're putting pressure on a partner. You should just want them to be with you on your journey. Then say
Hmm.
that, right? Like
That's honest.
if right, then you're owning the piece that is like, actually, this is mine, and I'm really scared slash upset slash want some different thing with you.
Hmm.
And so in working with somebody who's got their own journey and they want their partner, they want their friend to go with them, as long as that person is being honest, like, hey, I need a partner, are you interested? Could you
Mm.
go on this with me? Could you hold my hand while I get started? As opposed to thinking that, oh no, because I think it must be the most amazing idea ever. Like,
Mhm.
that's not helpful to most people, right? Like, if you want a partner on your journey, then just ask your friend or partner or colleague to go with you. And if they can't, they can't. Or if they're not willing, they're not willing. And at
Mhm.
least you know where you stand. And
Mhm.
there's not this expectation that you're going to
Right.
do something that, or give something of yourself that isn't really going to be useful or make a difference.
I love that too, because if you're expecting someone else to keep up with this goal and maybe it's not genuine to them and so it doesn't work for them, that would be such a shame if it impacted your motivation and your
Mhm.
desire to follow through with whatever your resolution, goal, or path is.
Right. And it's
So,
hard because if you're using that oxytocin to get you to your goal, right? Like, then you
mhm.
got to go find somebody who does want that. Maybe
Right.
find somebody in your friend group, or go, if it's a health journey, like, go take a cooking class or take a exercise class, or,
Mhm.
it does require being a little bit brave and taking a risk, right? Like, that maybe you have to meet a stranger to help you get there.
Right.
That's okay. But it does mean being honest about all of it, right? Like, I'm
Mhm.
scared of strangers. I don't want to go to a yoga class by myself and be bad at it. Like, yep, talk to the teacher, ask her or him, is there a beginner's class that I can go to where people are going to be kind or be generous? Like, and if the answer is no, go find a different class, right? Like, just
Yes.
be honest with yourself and why you need something, so that you're not putting your expectations or your goals in the hands of other people. It's not going to be good for you long term.
Right. So again, as we said in the beginning, and as your wonderful book that I would recommend everyone check out, The Queen's Path, it's the more connected you are with yourself, the more likely you're going to hear the truth about whether it's not just your path, but whether or not there are the barriers in your way that maybe perhaps are put there by others, or maybe they're those internal voices that you can actually work with. So
Absolutely.
for anyone who wants to find your book, find out more about you, stay connected to you, where can they find you?
So I'm very lucky. The book is out at any outlet where you buy books. So Bookshop, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I highly recommend shopping at your local bookstores. Local bookstores, especially at this time of year, need all the support we can give them. And if they don't have it, they'll order it. It's available on all of their networks. And yeah, if people are interested in me or want to know more about my work, you can find me at staceysimmonsphd.com. My first name has an E in it, so Stacey Simmons with an E. PhD.com is where you can find all kinds of information about my research, the work I do, the workshops I do. I also do psychedelic therapy, so that's on there as well.
We didn't even touch on that. I'll have to have you come back. Well, Stacey, this was such a great conversation. I'm so excited because I really feel like it's going to help people get their year off right, or if they're listening at another time, just any path, any goal. So thank you. And you'll have to come back and we'll talk about psychedelics.
I would love that. Thank you for having me, Amelia. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Goodbye. Be well, everyone.